Think for a minute about an orange. And when I've given this analogy many times, you take an orange and you squeeze it as hard as you can squeeze it, just, all right? And what comes out? These are easy questions, folks. Honest, don't look puzzled. Everybody passes, all right? Nobody fails tonight. What comes out is orange juice. But the question is, why, when you squeeze an orange real hard, does orange juice come out? And the answer to that is because that's what's inside. These are really easy. They get easier. All right? Now, does it matter who squeezes? Does it matter what instrument you use? Does it matter what time of the day you do it? Does it matter how you do it? When you do it? No. When you squeeze an orange, what comes out of an orange is what's inside. When you squeeze a person and put pressure on a person of any kind, and anger and hatred and stress and tension and depression come out, it isn't because of who is doing the squeezing or when they do it or how they choose to do it. It's because that's what's inside. And if you don't have it inside, it can never come out, no matter who you're living with. No matter how tough it may seem to you. And when somebody cuts you off on the freeway, and you're mad as hell and going to get even with them, and you're going to get up in front of them and slow down and make them see what it's like, it isn't because they cut you off that you're so upset. It's because that's what you carry around inside. And when you stop carrying that around inside, nothing that anybody does can upset you. No one can make a fool of you without your consent. Eleanor Roosevelt. No one can depress you. No one can make you anxious. No one can hurt your feelings. No one can make you anything other than what you allow inside. You see, my evolution has brought me to the point of understanding that each human being on our planet must take total responsibility for his own inner development, for his own inner development. And our inner development is something that we ignore a lot as we progress through this whole ladder of life. And I think of a metaphor. The metaphor is like a candle, and the candle flame that is burning inside of you. All right? Now, this candle flame, if you take a candle and walk out of here this evening and you see raindrops falling, it'll blow out your candle, and the wind will blow out your candle. There's all kinds of things that are going to happen outside of you that you have absolutely no control over to blow out your candles. Your candles are getting blown out all the time. We have an inner candle flame that must never flicker, though the worst goes before us. And that's perhaps the highest place we can get to in our lives, is to understand that what our own inner development, symbolized by that candle flame, must never change, must never even flicker. It is our responsibility, not only for ourselves, but for our children as well, to raise them to believe that whatever is going on inside of you is entirely up to you. You own it. It is yours. I'm going to give you another truth. Everything that is happening to you, whoever you are listening right at this moment, everything that's happening to you in your life, you have a voice in. You are creating. If you're not getting along with somebody on the job, if you're having difficulty in your relationships and feeling victimized, if your children don't respect you, look at yourself first and say, what is it about me? And what can I change in order to help myself not feel victimized? Not how can I get them to change? How can I make the world different? It's one of the fundamental problems is that people want the world to be different than it is. The world is perfect. There's no anxiety in it. There's no depression in it. There's no stress in it. Contrary to anything you've heard, the world is not a stressful place. It's a perfect place. You are a part of that world. You are part of the universe. Your perfection is also in your own creation. You're not a mistake. None of it is. There's only anxious thinking. There's only stressful thinking. There's only angry thoughts. There's no anger in the world. When you stop having that and replace that with this serenity I'm talking about, with this peace inside of yourself, you don't even know how to be victimized anymore. It's not like you learn all these strategies. You become healing instead of becoming poisoned. You are effective rather than trying to get there. You live it. You see, when you get enough inner grace or inner peace or serenity, whatever you want to call it, when you feel really positive about yourself, it's almost impossible for you to be controlled and manipulated by anybody else. I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, I had to get on an airplane and fly to Chicago. Now, I got on the airplane at 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Fort Lauderdale. The plane took off and flew for 30 minutes, and they couldn't retract the landing gear. They were stuck in the down position, so they had to land the plane in Miami, go back and land it in Miami. They had longer runways. It wasn't an emergency, but I wasn't convinced that they had that foam out there on the runways because they were just seeing if their foam equipment worked. They were trying to convince us there was no emergency, and that those ambulances weren't just standing by in case anybody fainted while they watched us land, that there was, in fact, some emergency. I watched people around me on the plane when we were having to do this, and some people were panicked and fearful and scared. There was one couple that jumped and screamed, and there was a lot of interesting reactions, a lot of ashen looks, and a lot of very scared people. And I looked at myself, and I didn't have any of that. I didn't have any of that. It was okay. And I knew I was going to be okay, and I saw myself being okay. It wasn't that I tried very hard not to be fearful. It was that inside of me, there is something that has replaced that fear, and that is called grace or serenity, and it was okay. It was just simply all right, and I was fine. In fact, I was effective. I calmed down the guy next to me. I looked around to see where the emergency exits were, because I wanted to know how to get out of this place. I used my mind in a situation where other people might elect panic. I was electing to be conscious, to be intelligent, to save myself if necessary, and I wasn't the least bit afraid. And I know I would have been afraid at an earlier time in my life. That fear, that potential for fear, has been replaced by peace and fulfillment and knowing that when it's my turn, and that's okay too, and that I'm not afraid of any of that. So we landed, okay, and everything was fine. And there was a computer part that was missing that wouldn't give the right signal for the landing gear to go up. So they had to replace the part, and they canceled the flight. And 192 people were on this plane, and it was full. It wasn't an empty seat. It was the last week after Easter break. There's no seats out of South Florida at all. They announced, the first thing they did was announce that there would be nobody getting a seat out of South Florida because you just can't get one on all the airlines. They're all filled up. And you probably will have to be here a couple of days until we can do something about it. And they even announced that they weren't going to put us up in a hotel. There was like all of these negative things coming out of these victimizers who work for the airline. And I watched the people around me. Now, a minute ago, they were worried about whether they were going to be alive. Now, suddenly, they're alive and they're relieved about that. Now they're angry because the plane isn't going to take off or they're going to have a replacement. And so there's all this anger. Now, I believe in looking for solutions, never looking for problems. So when the plane landed, they said, no one can get off the airplane. But I knew they probably weren't talking to me, okay? Because as soon as it landed, the door opened, I went out and called my secretary and said, I have to give a speech tomorrow morning in Chicago, and there's a lot of people depending on me to be there. There's 500 people waiting to hear me speak, and we've set up this date in advance. I see myself in Chicago. I know I'll be there. 191 other people didn't believe they would be in Chicago and acted just that way. They were angry. They were upset. They were yelling at the people. They were letting their blood pressure get out of control, and they weren't doing anything. I said to my secretary, I will call you back in 15 minutes. She was in Fort Lauderdale. I'll call you back collect in 15 minutes. Just make sure I have a seat on a plane, no matter what it costs or what the inconvenience or what it get me a seat. At the moment that she called, somebody the moment before had canceled on another airline a first-class seat. They had just canceled, said they weren't going. And I was able to get that seat because the person that she called handled the cancellation, and she just replaced me on there, okay, instead of going through the whole list. And I had a seat on a flight that was 5 hours away. But I still had a seat on a flight to get in much later than I anticipated. And I went down and got my boarding pass, and I was, out of 192 people, there was only one that made it to Chicago. And I was that one, not because I'm smarter than everybody else, or because I know anything that other people don't know, or because I'm better than anyone else. It was because I look for solutions, not for problems, and I refuse to be victimized by my need to be right through using anger and being upset and so on. When you are able to visualize yourself doing something, you start acting on that visualization or that image. You're able to make things happen when you're looking for solutions that you can never make happen when you're more preoccupied with being a victim.